Hello everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Tech Meetup channel. This video is going to be a little bit different than those that I usually make, and that I'm usually focused a little bit more on enterprise tech, particularly around data engineering, data platforms. However, I recently purchased a new MacBook Pro 16-inch, and like many of the people out on the internet, I've had the same issue that when I connect it to my external monitor, like I have here on my desk behind me, I was experiencing a lot of issues with heat buildup, fans kicking on at really high speed, and it was pretty frustrating. I was also concerned about what that extra heat might mean to the longevity of the components of this new laptop that I just spent a lot of money on. So I actually was able to find a combination that worked for me really well and was able to fix that problem. And it involved using DisplayPort as opposed to an HDMI dongle that I had previously been using. However, I got some additional questions after posting about that solution online with different combinations and maybe using USB-C to USB-C, or I've also seen online there's some people that had experiences when they changed the refresh rate. So in other words, some people thought that maybe going 60 hertz or above could make a difference, or even which side of the laptop that you plug in the cables on. So for example, if you have power and the monitor plugged into the same side, some people thought that that caused problems, while others said that moving it to opposite sides of the laptop on ports on opposite sides of the laptop actually fixed the problem for them. So I thought, well, I also at the same time I changed my cable, also moved over to the other side of the laptop. So I thought maybe I should test that too to verify it. Fortunately, I'm kind of lucky because in addition to the 34-inch LG ultra-wide that I have on my desk behind me, I also have a 4K monitor from LG. It happens to be the 34-inch monitor, and it has a number of additional ports in addition to HDMI and DisplayPort. And it has the HDMIs are some support 50 hertz, some support 60 hertz. There's also a USB-C port. And being that it's a 4K monitor, I could probably experiment with some scaling as well. So what I want to do in this video is I want to run through all the different test scenarios. I've actually made a spreadsheet where I have all these different combinations of refresh rates, ports, sides of the laptop, scaling factors, etc., that I'm going to test out. And so I'm going to walk through each of these different steps and figure out what works and what doesn't work and share that information here for you. So hopefully I can help a lot of you out there solve this problem, because it was frustrating for me. It's obviously when you go online and Google for this, or look on the different forums, look on Reddit, you'll see a lot of posts about it, and it's been a source of frustration. Some people are even returning multiple laptops to Apple trying to solve this problem, and it may be just a relatively easy fix for those of you that have the different monitor options or port options on the monitor that you have. Let's go ahead and take a little bit more look at specifically at what I'm using. So I have the 2019 MacBook Pro. Some of you may know the 2020 recently came out that offers another graphics option, which quite frankly is something I wouldn't have went with anyway, but this has the 8 gigabit graphics option. It is using the i9 2.4 gigahertz processors. Due to the work that I do on a daily basis around various data engineering technologies, machine learning, and other things that I work with as part of my career, I really did need the max out model, which is why I do have 64 gig of RAM. Might not be something everyone else uses, but for me it is pretty important. As well as having that maximum compute power. I do have a number of other dongles and cables we're going to talk about. The one that I actually got started out with is this dongle from Ugreen. It is their 9-in-1, and the reason I selected this one is it actually has a number of options for connectivity, which were pretty important to me, in particular the Ethernet interface, because as I move a lot of data around, even with really good Wi-Fi, I just find the reliability of a wired Ethernet connection at my desk to be something worth having. It does have that HDMI port, which ultimately, not because of the dongle. Like I say, I do think this is a really good piece. Metal casing. I've had really good experience with the Ugreen products, so I don't want this to be any type of a judgment on their products. Like I say, really good stuff. You get a number of ports, but what was also really interesting about it is that you can actually do a power pass-through. So I actually connected Ah, there it is. I was trying to find the connector. So you actually would connect your power adapter right in here to the dongle, and then you can connect this up to your computer. And I actually had a USB-C extension that then went up to my laptop, and I thought this is great because I'm going to be able to have a single connection to my MacBook, which would make docking and undocking from my desk really great. In the past, I actually worked for a company about 3 years ago, right after the 5K ultrafine came out, and it was really, that was my first experience with just single connection to my MacBook, and it worked really outstanding. And so I really wanted to get back to that same thing because my old personal laptop, 2015 MacBook Pro, it had worked great, but had like 7-8 cables I plugged in. I was pretty much maxing out everything around the ports and with different dongles and stuff and USB hubs hanging off of it. And so it was a little bit more work to dock and undock from my desk. But so I thought, okay, this might be a really great piece. And so we're going to test this one out for the HDMI capability. I happen to have another one. This is one I travel with, another Ugreen dongle, which has also been really great for connectivity on the go. Also has an HDMI port. I might actually end up trying out both of those. Then, and just to be sure that it's not some other vendor's solution that could be blamed for this, I thought I'd test with the Apple adapter as well. Now, what ultimately did end up working for me is that instead of going HDMI, I actually went with a DisplayPort cable from the MacBook Pro to my monitor. One of the things that a lot of people might not know is that while if you connect with HDMI, you actually do have to go through some type of conversion process for that connectivity to work. So from USB-C into some type of thing that has some chip in it that's going to do the conversion to HDMI and send it out to the monitor, where if you use DisplayPort, USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 support something called DisplayPort alternate mode, and so you have a more native connection when you go from USB-C to DisplayPort. And that may be something that's playing a role here and why it worked for me. But at the same time, there's some other combinations, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we do want to test out. So I have all those combinations in a spreadsheet so I don't miss anything. And we'll get started here with the testing. I guess one last thing I'll say is about cables. I do have a pretty high quality HDMI cable. I want to make sure that that's not the issue. And then later when we move over to the 43-inch monitor, we're actually going to test two cables. One is a very good USB-C cable, and I have this very nice Belkin Thunderbolt 3 cable. So there are some differences between USB-C and Thunderbolt, and these cables are also a bit more expensive than the normal USB-C cables, but I do have this Thunderbolt 3 cable that we'll use as well to see if that makes a difference. Finally, as I complete the testing, I'm going to be using an app. It's called Max Fan Control. Now, this app actually allows you to tune your fan speed yourself. I'm personally don't care to do that. It also requires you to give the app some additional permissions to install a little helper app and what have you. I really don't have a need for that. However, the app has a monitor mode, and it can provide you a lot of details about the fans. Not only a single fan speed, but each of the individual fans, the individual per core temperature sensors, GPU temperature sensors, etc. So that's going to be where I'm getting the data from, and I'll include some screenshots along the way so you can see the actual results. I'm ready to start running the first test. Just to give you an idea of baselines, just sitting here doing nothing. Core temperatures are sitting right now around the lower to mid 40s, so 41, 42 up to about 46 degrees Celsius. The GPU temperatures are also sitting in right around that mid 40 range. GPU proximity of 44 Celsius on one of the measurements, and proximity 2 is about 40 degrees Celsius. Fan speeds on the left side, just a little above 1800, about 1820. On the right side, they're sitting right about 1690. I'm going to go ahead and plug in with the dongle and HDMI to the monitor, and we'll see how things change from there. All right, I've finished the testing. Had a few surprises along the way, as well as confirming a few things that I actually was expecting to see. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are some other tips out there that you might find on the internet how to help solve this problem, involving different refresh rates and where the connectors are connected specifically on the MacBook Pro. as well as a few other things. And so I'm just going to walk through my results, and hopefully there's going to be something in here that'll, help you solve this issue for yourself. Let me first start out by saying that when it comes to HDMI, I mentioned these various different dongles. I really saw no difference between the two different options from Ugreen that I tested out, including the 9-in-1 adapter. Kind of already built it back in my desk, so can't show it to you again, or the Apple adapter itself. They really both produced the exact same results. It was very consistent, both on my ultra-wide monitor behind me, as well as on the 43-inch LG 4K that I tested on. And the other thing I would say is on the 43-inch LG, I also tested with Thunderbolt 3 cables, as well as USB-C cables. Yes, the connectors are the same, but there are some differences between them. And here again, absolutely no difference whatsoever. And I think as long as you have a pretty good high quality USB-C cable, if you need to make a USB-C to USB-C connection, you should be just fine. I wouldn't worry about that too much as well. The next thing I would talk about is, let's first look at the results on the 4K monitor. So a big difference between the 4K monitor and my ultra-wide is that my ultra-wide on HDMI can only go to 50 Hertz, where the DisplayPort can go to 60 Hertz. On the 4K monitor, I have two HDMI connections at 30 Hertz, 2 at 60 Hertz. You also have the DisplayPort at 60 Hertz, as well as the USB-C that also does 60 Hertz. Now, and so I tested on a variety of those. And what I could pretty consistently see across the board is that on the 4K, I could generally get good results, whether using the dongles or using the DisplayPort connection or USB-C. I was able to get minimum fan speeds. And the results I tracked the most were the left side fan, because that's the one that runs a little bit faster and would arguably then contribute to the most noise as well. And so looking at that, I was able to attain minimum results right around 18, a little over 1800 RPMs, regardless of whether using USB-C or DisplayPort. There was, however, one difference, and that is that you could only achieve those results when the lid of the MacBook Pro was closed. So in other words, the clamshell mode, as it's oftentimes referred to. And so if you want the slowest fan speeds connected to an external monitor, the first thing I think I could observe across the board is that you do want to have the MacBook Pro display closed. The other thing that is often mentioned online is connecting the USB-C ports on different sides of the computer. In other words, you have power coming in on one side, then connect your monitor to the other side. Sometimes when I would run those tests, having the connectors on the opposite sides actually was a little better. So in other words, the fans ran a little bit slower, but other times I'd do the exact same test and it would be slightly worse. In other words, the fans would run slightly faster when the connectors were on opposite sides. So I'm going to say that that one is not helpful. Plug your cables in where it's most convenient for your desk setup, and don't really worry too much about what effect that might have on temperatures or fan speeds. The next thing then is refresh rate. So I did read online a number of comments regarding refresh rate. Some people saying 60 Hertz and above. Now, unfortunately, I have no monitor that I can test significantly above 60 Hertz to know how that performance may be. However, consistently, whether it was on either of the monitors, anytime I was at 60 Hertz, the temperatures were really great and under control. And so initially when I bought the DisplayPort cable to use on my own MacBook Pro, my assumption was, oh, DisplayPort is a little bit less complicated connection than going through a converter and HDMI to the monitor. And it was really the DisplayPort thing was just easier, less complicated. However, now that I've done this testing, what I realize is the reason DisplayPort cable works for me is on my ultra-wide monitor, I have to have DisplayPort to get 60 Hertz. I only get 50 Hertz on HDMI. And so getting to that 60 Hertz mark is what drops the temperature. So on this particular monitor, the only solution really is DisplayPort. The final thing I want to point out is resolution. So on the 4K monitor, yes, there was a little bit more heat generated when you use the when you have the full 4K resolution. But at the 4K resolutions over DisplayPort, over USB-C, it had no problem driving that monitor and staying cool even at the full 4K resolution, and also scaling to other resolutions like 2560 by 1440 were absolutely no problems. You could get good low temperatures. The key being, again, you were in that 60 hertz and above refresh rate. There was one anomaly in the testing that I really couldn't explain, and that was that there are the 30 hertz HDMI ports on the 4K monitor, and when I used those ports, I had no problems getting low temperatures at 30 hertz. On my ultra-wide, I could actually set in the scaling settings in macOS, I could actually reduce the refresh rate to 30 hertz, and there it made no difference. It was still hot. So I'm really not sure why 30 hertz works on one and not on the other. And if you're thinking about changing your refresh rates in that way to perhaps get cooler temperatures, understand it may work, it may not work. You're just going to have to try it and test it out. So to summarize, the single most important thing you want to consider is that you're going to need a monitor that is capable of at least a 60 hertz refresh rate. That may mean on some older models like my ultra-wide that you're going to need to use a DisplayPort connection to achieve that. Some of the newer monitors will probably be able to more easily provide that refresh rate using HDMI. And as long as you have that, all the testing I did indicates you're going to be pretty good. The other thing to consider is if you don't need your MacBook Pro display open while connected to an external monitor, you will also see lower temperatures by being in clamshell mode. That was able to be confirmed in all the tests that I did. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about which side of the MacBook Pro you're plugging your cables into. And also I found that resolution also wasn't very critical. So that's the results of the testing. Hopefully you'll find some of this information useful, and it'll allow you to select a monitor or cable combination that will let you use your MacBook Pro without high temperatures, without high fan noise, ultimately one, increasing your enjoyment of using it, as well as perhaps even improving the longevity by eliminating all of that heat over time. So that's it for this video. If you liked it, please click the like button. Oftentimes on my videos, I do ask people to subscribe. However, I recognize this video is a little bit different than those that I usually post. So, don't feel pressured to do that if this channel is not usually the topic that you're interested in. And other than that, thanks. Have a good day.